When the Moore family entered the hotel they had just purchased, the white manager scornfully refused to give them a room, unaware of who they really were. Soon, he and the entire staff would realize that the rules had changed. What happened next would astonish even the most seasoned observers. But let's start from the very beginning. When the Moore family, William, Clarissa, their daughter Amelia, and their son Daniel, stepped through the doors of their newly acquired hotel, they were filled with pride and a quiet sense of triumph. The spacious lobby, with its high ceilings, sparkling chandeliers, mirrored columns, and neat leather armchairs, now belonged to them. They had dreamed of this for years, working tirelessly to own a place that would become their family business. But soon, their joy and pride were overshadowed by an odd feeling of alienation. As they approached the reception desk, Richard, a white manager with a piercing stare and a cold smile, cast them a skeptical, almost disdainful look. William noticed this, but tried not to show he was bothered. Calmly and confidently, he said, "Good afternoon. We're the Moore family. We've reserved a suite." Richard barely raised an eyebrow, responding without a hint of hospitality and avoiding eye contact. "Sorry, but we don't have any suites available today. Are you sure you made a reservation?" Clarissa frowned, noticing Richard's frosty tone, but gently encouraged the children to avoid feeling uncomfortable. William tried to explain again. "Yes, we're sure. Our suite should be ready. It was booked in advance." Richard sighed impatiently and pretended to check the computer. Finally, he looked up, visibly irritated. "Sorry, but there's nothing here. Maybe you have the wrong hotel. We have strict standards here and suites aren't simply booked on a whim," he said, barely concealing a sarcastic smirk. At this point, William felt his frustration building. However, taking a deep breath, he chose to stay composed. Clarissa noticed his restraint and squeezed his hand for support. Amelia and Daniel, picking up on the manager's cold demeanor, tried to understand what was happening. Clarissa stepped forward, determined to clarify the situation. "Look," she said, struggling to maintain a smile. "We're here legally. We're not just customers. We're the new owners of this hotel. The suite was prepared for us, and you should show some respect." Richard was momentarily stunned, staring at Clarissa in disbelief. He tried to hide his surprise, chuckling sarcastically. "The new owners? Well, isn't that cute?" he said dismissively. "But I don't have that information. Maybe you should find somewhere else." William exhaled deeply, sensing his patience was at its limit. Leaning closer to Richard, he spoke calmly but firmly. "Perhaps you're not aware of the change in ownership, but it's true. We own this hotel, and we're asking you to arrange everything as it should be." Richard nervously averted his gaze, finally realizing he'd gone too far. Still unwilling to believe William and Clarissa, Richard sighed and pretended to double-check the system, masking his irritation, but making it clear he was not inclined to give in. "Sorry, but we don't have any information about a change in ownership. Without proper documents, there's nothing I can do," he said, barely concealing his disdain. William and Clarissa exchanged glances. Seeing how Richard was humiliating them, Clarissa felt her resentment grow. But before she could say anything, a few other employees approached the desk, attracted by the conversation. One of them, glancing at the family, smirked and whispered to a colleague, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So, are we just letting anyone in here now?" Another employee chimed in quietly. "Exactly. This place isn't for just anyone." William clenched his fists, struggling not to show how much those words hurt. Amelia and Daniel, overhearing the exchange, lowered their heads, feeling uncomfortable. Clarissa pulled them closer, her gaze growing icy, but she stayed silent, letting her husband decide their next move. Richard, hearing these remarks, gave a theatrical sigh and turned back to the Moore family. "You see, we're a high-class hotel, and we have to maintain certain standards. Perhaps you'd be better off somewhere else," he said with restrained but unmistakable superiority. Finally, William had enough. He took out his phone and dialed the number of the lawyer who handled the transaction. While he waited for an answer, the staff continued to watch them with mocking glances. A tense silence filled the lobby. "Hello, Michael," William said into the phone, not taking his eyes off Richard. "We need to clarify a situation. Please come to the lobby to confirm ownership of the hotel. Richard started to look nervous, but tried to maintain his composure. He glanced back at the family, but his confidence was waning. At that moment, the family's attorney, Michael, approached the desk, holding the ownership documents. "Apologies for the misunderstanding," he said to Richard calmly. "I'm here to officially present the new owners of the hotel, the Moore family." Richard's face changed instantly, shifting from sarcastic discontent to utter shock. The other employees froze in disbelief, realizing they had seriously misjudged the situation. Realizing that he was indeed standing before his new bosses, Richard shifted uneasily, his face showing a mixture of embarrassment and fear. But he quickly tried to regain his composure, adjusting his tie and forcing a polite smile. "Sorry for the misunderstanding," he said, with forced courtesy, clearly attempting to smooth things over. "Not all the staff were informed of the changes. We, of course, want to ensure you're comfortable in our hotel." But William didn't rush to accept his apology. He looked at Richard calmly and firmly, striving not to let emotions take over. "We're not just guests, Richard. We're the owners," he reminded him. "And to begin with, I'd like to see our suite and the necessary areas." Richard nodded nervously, motioning them to follow him. As they crossed the lobby, all eyes were on the Moore family. The same employees who had mocked and whispered now averted their gazes in embarrassment. They entered the elevator, and Richard, standing beside them, forced himself to say the usual words, trying to regain his composure. "I assure you, our staff always strives to maintain high service standards, and of course, we'll ensure your stay is comfortable." Clarissa, unable to hold back, replied coldly, "If your high standards include treating our guests like this, I'm afraid we have a lot to change." The elevator stopped at the top floor, and Richard, with noticeable tension in his voice, said, "Here is your suite, the best room in our hotel. Please." They entered the luxurious room with panoramic windows, and the surroundings seemed to restore some of the joy they had brought with them. William thanked Richard and warned him, "Tomorrow morning, we'll hold a meeting with the entire staff. We have some thoughts on your high standards for this hotel. I hope you'll be ready for changes." Richard nodded, aware that this was more than just a warning. He left, his stiff posture betraying his fear of the inevitable changes. In William and Clarissa's eyes was a resolute determination. They were committed to making this a place free of prejudice and arrogance. The next morning, all the hotel staff gathered in the conference room, tension palpable in the air. Rumors had already spread that the new owners wanted to meet with the team. Richard stood off to the side, arms crossed, avoiding his colleagues' eyes, clearly understanding he might be a focus of the discussion. William and Clarissa entered the room, calm but with determination in their eyes. William greeted everyone and got straight to the point. "My wife and I are your new owners, and we're here to steer this place in a new direction. We believe a hotel is more than just walls and service. It's a place where every guest should feel comfortable, no matter who they are or where they come from." The room fell silent. William shot a look at Richard, signaling he was aware of his behavior. He continued, "Last night, my family experienced bias. I'm sure many of you saw it. That's not something we'll tolerate in our hotel." Richard cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to say something, but Clarissa firmly interrupted. "This hotel will be a place where every employee respects each guest and each other. We want an establishment we can be proud of. And if anyone isn't prepared to support that culture, they'll have to leave our team." Some employees shifted uncomfortably, while relief appeared on the faces of many. It was clear that real change was coming. Clarissa added, "Starting today, we'll be implementing training for all staff so that everyone understands how much we value respect for guests and colleagues, and we'll enforce standards to uphold this." After the meeting, Richard approached William, ready to explain or apologize, but William calmly stopped him. "I hope you've learned something, Richard. And remember, your behavior is your choice." Richard nodded silently, knowing that his old habits would no longer be forgiven here. Over the next few weeks, the hotel's atmosphere transformed. The staff became friendlier. Even the skeptics began to treat guests with respect. More clients were drawn to the hotel, sensing its warm atmosphere and welcoming attitude. Each employee now understood that their work wasn't just a job, but a contribution to creating a place where every guest was welcomed. The Moore family watched as their hotel became a space free from bias and snobbery, knowing their dream had come true.